Have we ever idolized freedom, only to turn our backs on those who lived and died for it? The Mustang, an unyielding legend of freedom, once ran like the wind, unstoppable. But today, a Mustang lies defeated in the snow, gasping for breath as the cold slices through its flesh like a knife. No rescue. No mercy. Just silence. Can the heroic spirit of the Mustang rise in this darkest of moments? This story will not only bring tears to your eyes but will also ask a brutal question. Are we truly worthy of the freedom we so proudly claim? Brace yourself. This story will force you to confront a harsh, undeniable truth. The blizzard rages on, a relentless beast that devours every trace of the world around it. Snow falls thick and fast, blanketing the sky in a shroud of white, mercilessly covering the earth below. In this desolate wasteland, amidst the bone-chilling winds, only the sound of desperate breaths breaks the silence. Nova, the Mustang that once stood as the very emblem of freedom and defiance, now lies crumpled in the storm, barely clinging to life. Its once proud coat is now buried beneath a blanket of cold, unforgiving snow. Old wounds, etched deep into its body, stand as permanent reminders of the suffering it has endured. Its frame, once a symbol of strength, now appears fragile, gaunt, a faint echo of what it used to be. Nova's eyes, once bright with the unquenchable fire of freedom, now stare dimly, reflecting only the heartbreak of a spirit broken. It is no longer the wild Mustang that once ran free across the open plains. Now, it is but a creature drained of life, waiting in isolation for the end. Nova had once been free. It once ran like the wind across endless fields, its head held high, its nostrils filled with the fresh air of liberty. But now, amidst this raging storm, it cannot run. It cannot fight. Its strength has faded, leaving it defenseless against the biting cold that tears at its flesh. All that remains is the haunting desire to reclaim a freedom lost. In that frozen moment, a memory flickers in Nova's mind, those vast, endless fields, the vibrant mornings with the wind blowing through its mane, the shimmering dewdrops on the grass. Nova once soared beyond the limits of freedom, but now, it can only cry out in silence, waiting for a release that it no longer dares to believe will come. Under the darkened sky, the storm swirls relentlessly, sweeping away everything, the marks of Nova, the fragile hopes that once stirred within it. The world around it is eerily still, broken only by the howling wind, as if the universe itself is sighing, watching the collapse of a creature that once embodied liberty. Nova cannot protect itself, cannot escape. It can do nothing but wait, for salvation or for its inevitable end. In its fading eyes, there is a flicker of light, a fragile spark of hope, a glimmer of something beyond mere survival. Perhaps it is the salvation of another, perhaps a gentle hand, bringing warmth amidst the cold. Will anyone come to save Nova? Is freedom just a far-off dream, or is it the only salvation left for it to find? The winds blow past Nova, carrying with them the faintest trace of hope. Perhaps someone will come, a person with a compassionate heart, offering salvation and, for the first time in so long, a chance to experience freedom once more. Something Nova never knew could be reborn from such agony. Amid the relentless snowstorm, when Nova's life seemed to hang by a fragile breath, a shadow moved through the swirling snow. Who would come to offer this wild horse a chance to survive? And, as all hope seemed to fade, could the courage of this woman be enough to change its fate? The snowstorm howled outside, like an invisible beast sweeping away every trace of the world around it. Lena Thompson felt the cold differently than most. Over the years, she had become part of this wilderness, where every living creature had to face the brutal force of nature. But to her, wild animals were not just mindless beings. They had souls, emotions, and they deserved to be saved. Lena was a strong, compassionate, and courageous woman. She lived in a small house amid the untamed wilderness, where snowstorms felt like waves relentlessly battering the lives of the creatures. Yet, amid this harshness, she never stopped fighting, not just for herself, but for those fragile beings who couldn't defend themselves. With a warm heart, Lena wasn't just a volunteer animal rescuer, she was the one creature that these suffering animals could rely on. The fatigue sometimes weighed heavily on her, but each time she faced an abandoned animal, with eyes full of desperate hope, she realized that this work was her reason for living. Even when her heart wanted to give up, when despair crept in, Lena kept pressing on. Her unconditional love for animals was the only fire that never faded inside her. Lena was driving along a snow-covered road when the storm suddenly hit. Snow blanketed the world in white, the wind howling as if trying to blow everything away. Despite the danger, she felt a strong, unexplainable urge, as if someone, was calling her to stop, as if everything in her and the universe was urging her to do this. An inexplicable feeling washed over her, a quiet urging she couldn't ignore. Unable to resist, Lena slowed down, the car swaying in the blizzard. And then, in the faint glow of the headlights, she saw a shape, a form in the white snow. Her heart tightened. Could it be? She wondered. The horse lay there, its head bowed in the snow, weak and emaciated. A wild Mustang abandoned in total despair. It wasn't just a horse lying in the snow, it was a symbol of freedom, of resilience, now brought to its knees. Nova's body reflected the devastation of the wild, the hope slowly fading away. A surge of fear rose in Lena's chest. But in that moment, a fierce resolve flashed within her. I can't let it die here. She stepped out of the car, despite the cold making her shiver. The wind sliced through her like needles, but Lena didn't let that stop her. She moved closer, gently yet determinedly, as if nothing on this earth could make her abandon this suffering creature. When Lena placed her hand on Nova's back, a magical sensation coursed through her. A faint glimmer flickered in the horse's eyes, but it wasn't just light. It was a connection, one that only souls who had touched both despair and hope could feel. Lena felt Nova's every breath, and she knew she wasn't just saving it, she was resurrecting the belief in love and compassion in a dark world. Don't worry, you won't die here, not today, Lena whispered, and in that moment, the wind seemed to stop, as if listening to her words, as if it knew that a miracle was about to unfold. Amid the relentless snowstorm, as Nova teetered on the edge of death, a silent question rang out in Lena's heart: could she save a life already slipping away? And, in this moment of despair, could any miracle truly unfold? Lena stood there, her hand trembling as it touched Nova's cold, lifeless body. Her fingers felt as though they were reaching into a dead world, not a horse, but a symbol of despair, of exhaustion. Nova's body was frail, emaciated, drained of all resistance, with only its dull, helpless eyes staring back at her. Each breath it took felt like a battle, a fragile plea for survival in the face of the relentless cold. Lena felt the freezing wind cutting into her skin, but she did not falter. A strange surge of emotion rose within her, an unspoken conviction that she could not let Nova die here, in this merciless storm. Nova. Hold on to hope. You're not alone, Lena whispered, her voice soft yet firm, as if her words were the only warm flame in the brutal cold. She quickly wrapped Nova in a thick blanket, gently rubbing its back, never ceasing her encouragement. You'll be alright. I won't leave you, Lena said, not only for Nova to hear but also as a reminder to herself. Every word, every caress felt like a sweet promise, a steadfast vow to reconnect these two beings so completely different from one another. Lena retrieved some dry food from her truck, carefully placing it near Nova's mouth, urging it to eat, even knowing how difficult it would be. Nova stared at the food, then, after a moment, weakly lifted its mouth and began eating bit by bit. Lena smiled, tears rolling down her cheeks. Every small gesture from Nova was a victory, a sign of life. Don't worry, you'll eat more. Just hang on a little longer. The winds howled relentlessly, but Lena did not feel the weight of fatigue. Her legs were heavy, yet she kept her steps steady. Facing the blizzard and the exhaustion creeping within herself, she moved closer to Nova, guiding it step by step through the thick snow. Every step Nova took was a battle, but every step Lena took was also a challenge. They were like two warriors side by side, unwilling to give up, even as the storm threatened to drown all hope. We'll make it, Lena whispered, her gaze unwavering like a mother protecting her child. Even when her strength waned, she could not stop, she couldn't let Nova die here, not today. She knew that every step Nova took, every effort it made, was a declaration of defiance against death. Lena felt the despair, the exhaustion of Nova. This wild horse had once been the embodiment of strength and freedom, but now it lay in her hands, weak and spent. Yet in Nova's eyes, Lena saw something still burning, a faint spark of hope. It was the hope she had ignited through her tender care. The wind screamed as they moved, but Lena's resolve remained unbroken. She was not just saving Nova physically, but also restoring faith in life, in love, and in sacrifice. She knew that saving Nova was not just about saving a horse, it was about saving a part of herself. The world around them seemed to fade away, leaving only the steady breath of Nova and the crunch of Lena's footsteps. Beneath the vast white expanse of snow, they pressed on together, a journey full of hardships but also full of hope. Lena's eyes remained fixed on Nova, not just with empathy, but with a promise, "You'll get through this. We won't give up." As the storm finally subsided, and Nova's wounds slowly began to heal in the safety of the warm house, Lena wondered, would her love and sacrifice be enough to help Nova break free from the deep scars in its soul, or was this only a brief respite before they faced an even greater challenge, a journey to rediscover true life and freedom? In the peaceful quiet of the house, where the cold winds outside could not penetrate, Lena carefully brought Nova inside, holding on to a hope that could not be extinguished, even though Nova's wounds were far from healed. After hours of fighting through the snowstorm, when everything around seemed to disappear, only one faint light remained: Nova, the abandoned wild horse, frail and weak, lying by the hearth. Lena's heart was heavy with worry, unsure if Nova would survive the night. But she knew she had to hold on to hope. The hope for life, for the miracles that only love could bring. Lena gently stroked Nova's back, her hand trembling but steady. Each caress was a promise, a vow that she would not abandon Nova, that together they would overcome every hardship. "You'll be all right, Nova. I won't leave you," Lena whispered, her voice soft but full of determination, as though her words were the only warmth in the cold, frozen world around them. Every day, Lena did more than just care for Nova physically, she created a safe space where Nova could feel the gentleness and love it had never known. She fed Nova nutritious meals, simple, yet rich in sustenance, and brewed warm herbal tea from plants she knew. These meals and cups of tea were not only physical nourishment but spiritual gifts that Lena gave to Nova, a part of life she would not let slip away. With each small step of progress Nova made, Lena saw the magic of love and patience at work. A slight movement, a faint whinny, all of these small changes filled Lena's heart with a joy that words could not capture. Every time Nova raised its head, its eyes no longer dull but glimmering with a faint spark of hope, Lena smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. She wasn't just saving Nova, she was reclaiming the spirit it had lost, and in doing so, she was also rediscovering a love she had forgotten within herself. With each passing day, Lena realized that in caring for Nova, she wasn't just restoring a life, she was restoring herself. The sacrifices and patience were not merely challenges to endure, but a journey of self-discovery. Lena began to understand that love is not just about unconditional giving, but also about receiving growth, receiving strength from the trials that life presents. As she watched Nova recover, bit by bit, Lena felt the bond between them grow stronger than ever before. This wasn't just a horse and a person rescuing it, this was a friendship, a miraculous connection that only those who have endured pain can truly understand. Her love for Nova wasn't simple, it was born of deep empathy, a revival of a wounded soul, both Nova's and her own. Lena realized that with each passing moment, she wasn't just caring for Nova, Nova was caring for her too. Nova's resilience in every weak breath taught Lena about the strength within the human heart, about the unyielding hope that never fades, even when faced with life's most biting storms. As Nova began to recover, its eyes slowly began to glimmer with a faint yet hopeful light. A heavy question rose in Lena's heart: would her love and sacrifice be enough to keep Nova with her, or would freedom, the one thing Nova needed above all, force her to do the very thing her heart could not bear? Nova had started to recover. Its once frail body now carried the faint stirrings of life. Its steps were no longer shaky, and its eyes, once clouded, now sparkled with a glimmer of hope. Yet, what Lena could not escape was the inner turmoil that gnawed at her. The horse she had cared for and loved was slowly returning to life, but there was one undeniable truth: Nova could not stay in this house forever. Although it had begun to heal, freedom, something a wild Mustang needed, was something Lena could not offer. Every time Lena looked at Nova, every time its eyes searched for her with quiet expectation, her heart broke. She knew that, no matter how much she loved Nova, no matter how desperately she wanted to keep it, it would never be happy. Nova was a wild horse. Freedom was its instinct, its essence. The look in its eyes, not just seeking protection, but something greater, was a painful reminder that it could not be held captive. Lena looked at Nova, now standing stronger, its eyes shining with a hope that she could not provide. It didn't need a warm house. It needed the vast sky, the endless fields, where it could run free and merge with nature. Every day, as Nova took each small step in the house, the painful reality became clearer. Despite saving it, she could not keep it here, and could not give it what it truly needed. Lena knew that this decision would be the hardest one of her life. Keeping Nova might give her a sense of security, but in doing so, she would be suffocating the wild spirit within it. True love, to Lena, was not about possession. Love was sacrifice and freedom. And what she had to do was give Nova the chance to live true to its instincts. She began searching for an animal sanctuary where Nova could live freely, blending in with other Mustangs. She knew it was the best thing for Nova, but every time she thought about letting it go, a lump rose in her throat. The months of care she had given Nova were etched deep in her heart, and the thought of parting with it was unimaginable. Though Lena's heart tightened at the thought, she understood that if she truly loved Nova, she had to let it go. A Mustang could not live in captivity. It needed space, air, and freedom to be true to itself. And Lena knew that only when Nova was free could it live as it was meant to. When Lena found the sanctuary where Nova could live freely, her heart grew heavy. It was the right decision, but the pain of parting was overwhelming. The days spent with Nova had given her a love that was beyond measure, and now she had to do the unthinkable. She had to let it go, so it could find itself, regain its freedom. Lena stood in the small room, where Nova lay next to the warm stove. She looked at Nova, its eyes closed, as if sensing the comfort Lena had given. In that moment, Lena knew that, no matter how painful the separation was, this was the necessary sacrifice for Nova to live true to its nature. With each passing day as Nova regained her strength, Lena found herself facing an agonizing question: would her love and sacrifice be enough to keep Nova by her side, or would only freedom, the one thing Nova longed for above all else, set them both free? The atmosphere that morning was suffocating. The first light of day filtered through the window, but it couldn't lift the weight pressing heavily on Lena's heart. She knew today would be the last day she and Nova spent together. Though she had prepared herself for this farewell, her heart couldn't bear it. Every action she took to prepare for the journey, every piece of food, every bottle of water, carried the sorrow of a mother forced to say goodbye to the child she had loved and cared for. When she looked at Nova, those innocent eyes, still full of trust, Lena couldn't contain the pang of grief. Those eyes didn't know that this would be their last meeting. They didn't know that every moment from now on would become a memory Lena would carry with her for the rest of her life. The weight in her chest was indescribable, but she knew, despite the love between them, Nova couldn't stay with her forever. Lena began the drive, but each step felt heavier than the last. With Nova by her side, the silence in the car was almost unnerving. She could hear the soft breaths of both herself and Nova, fragile but strong. She knew that no matter where she took Nova, it needed something she couldn't provide: freedom. The wild freedom Nova so rightly deserved. She looked into its eyes, seeing not just a search for safety but something more profound, a freedom she could not give. Each mile that passed, her heart felt like a wound that wouldn't heal. Every moment spent with Nova deepened the unspoken bond between them. They didn't need to say anything, the connection was unbreakable. Nova had recovered, but freedom was the final piece it needed to live fully. As the sanctuary came into view, with its vast space and freedom, Lena felt her heart shatter. This was where Nova belonged, yet the pain felt unbearable. She stopped the car, looking at Nova one last time. Every passing second felt like an eternity. This was the moment she had to make a decision her heart couldn't accept: to say goodbye. She stepped out of the car and stood beside Nova, her hand gently running through its mane. Her heart twisted in agony. She could feel Nova seeking comfort in her touch, and she knew that, as painful as it was to say goodbye, this was the greatest act of love she could give it. A farewell full of love and liberation, a necessary act to allow Nova to live according to its true nature. With a choked voice, Lena whispered, "Live free, Nova. You will always be in my heart." That was the final goodbye, not because she didn't love it, but because she loved it so much that she had to let it go. She couldn't hold Nova back when freedom was its very essence. And though the pain was unbearable, she knew it was the right thing to do. Lena stood motionless, watching Nova walk into the sanctuary, blending into the vast open space where it could run free, living according to its wild instincts. She knew, despite the separation, this love would never fade. Nova would live free, and she had given it the greatest gift, absolute freedom. As Nova disappeared behind the dunes, Lena turned away, each step she took sounding like the quiet sigh of a farewell. But she knew that, even in their distance, this love would forever remain in her heart, unchanged. Nova had found its freedom, and Lena had done the only thing she could to let it truly live, giving it the opportunity to return to itself. As Nova finally finds freedom in the sanctuary, Lena faces an unspoken question: can her love and sacrifice be enough to let go, or is it only freedom, what Nova desires more than anything, that can truly free both their hearts? The sanctuary unfolded before Lena like a vast, unending canvas, where Nova could run freely, blending in with the wild Mustang herd. Its first steps on the lush, green grass symbolized recovery, the rebirth of life. No longer the fragile, exhausted horse Lena had rescued, Nova now stood as a wild warrior, strong and free. Lena stood from afar, watching Nova blend into the wilderness, and her heart grew heavy. Every stride Nova took was a reminder of the long journey they had shared. Lena realized this was where Nova belonged. No longer did it need a warm home or meticulous care, it needed the endless sky and the boundless freedom. Nova ran freely across the expansive land, merging with the herd like it had always belonged there. The other horses weren't just companions, they were its family, the place where it could truly find harmony and freedom. Lena stood silently, her eyes brimming with tears as she watched Nova run without fear or hesitation. She knew this was the best thing for Nova, even though it tore at her heart. Each time she saw Nova integrate with its world, Lena understood that the love she had for it was not about ownership, it was about liberation. This was the lesson she had learned through their journey together: love is about letting go, love is about allowing the one you love to live true to their nature. Lena not only learned the meaning of sacrifice but also realized that love is not a solitary struggle. It is a shared journey between two beings. As she watched Nova meld with the herd, she saw a piece of herself reflected in it. True love isn't about holding on, it's about giving the one you love the opportunity to live freely and authentically. She understood that the months she spent caring for Nova had taught her patience and unconditional sacrifice. Love is not about possession, but about freedom, allowing someone to find themselves, no matter how painful it may be. As Lena stood there, Nova was no longer the weak horse she had saved. It had become a part of this world, a wild, free warrior. She watched it integrate with the herd, each stride an assertion that it had found where it belonged. Lena knew this was the moment she had to let go, to give Nova the freedom it deserved. But her heart tightened as she thought that this would be the last time she saw Nova. She turned away, unable to look back. She feared that if she did, she wouldn't have the strength to move forward. While this goodbye was anything but easy, she knew it was the right thing to do, for Nova was not a horse to be confined. Nova was wild, it was freedom, and she had given it that choice. As Nova faded into the tall grass and the herd surrounding it, Lena felt an odd emptiness, as if a part of her had gone with it. But she also realized that this love could never be extinguished. It lived in every free stride Nova took, in every moment of sacrifice she made to bring it freedom. And in her heart, Nova would forever be a part of her. When Nova finally blends into the herd of wild horses, freedom becomes an eternal moment that Lena can only watch from afar, yet her heart understands that this is just the beginning of a journey that she and Nova will never forget. The sanctuary unfolded before Lena's eyes like a beautiful painting, a place where Nova could run free, merging into the wild world. Its powerful strides across the vast field were not only a physical rebirth but a confirmation that Nova had found freedom, the very thing it had longed for. No longer the weak, exhausted horse Lena had rescued, Nova was now a wild warrior, strong and free. Lena stood at a distance, watching Nova merge with the herd, feeling every beat of her heart. It was joy, but also deep sorrow, as she realized that freedom was the final gift she could give Nova. Despite the pain in her heart as she thought of their parting, she understood that true love was not possession but liberation. As Nova ran freely, merging with the herd, the other horses weren't just companions but its family. Lena saw in Nova's eyes true freedom, not fear, not suffering, but living true to its instincts. Each step Nova took was a powerful affirmation that it had found where it truly belonged. Lena couldn't hold back her tears, but she knew this was the best thing for Nova. She realized that love was not about holding on but about letting go, giving Nova the opportunity to live freely, true to its essence. Watching Nova blend into nature, Lena felt the lesson she had learned throughout this journey. Love is not possession but sacrifice and liberation. She knew that true love is when you allow the one you love to find themselves, to live according to what they truly deserve. It was a great lesson about loving and letting go. As Nova gradually disappeared into the tall grass and the surrounding herd of horses, Lena stood there, her heart full of emotions. She knew this was the last time she would see Nova, but its departure marked the beginning of a new chapter, not just for Nova but for herself as well. Although parting was always painful, Lena understood that this was the right decision. Lena turned away, but not with the pain of parting, but with the hope that Nova would live the life it deserved. She knew this love was not the end, but the beginning of a new journey for both of them. The story of Nova is an eternal message about love, sacrifice, and freedom. It reminds us that sometimes, love means letting go so that the one you love can live true to their essence. Love is not about possession, but liberation. And in that love, sacrifice is never in vain. Sometimes, sacrifice is the greatest gift we can give to others. Lena and Nova have gone through a journey full of challenges, but their journey is not over. Nova has found freedom, and Lena has learned that true love is when you can freely let go, allowing the one you love to live true to what they truly deserve. And life, freedom, and love may continue.